What can we pull from two close losses to the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning over the weekend? How concerned are we with the Wild's goaltending situation? What's going on with Kevin Fiala? Plus, Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi are putting up numbers in Iowa. When can we expect to see him called up? All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild. Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, Locked On Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we recap the weekend in Florida as the Wild lose to the Florida Panthers in regulation and lose in a shootout to the Tampa Bay Lightning. We also talk about the Jared Spurgeon injury news. We talk about Kevin Fiala and where he is at with his Minnesota Wild tenure. Plus, we look at a couple of players knocking on the door with some more impressive performances in Iowa from Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer with over a decade's worth of coverage of all Minnesota sports teams, and joined, as we typically are on a Monday episode, by Alex Micheletti for a Micheletti Monday. Alex, couple of fun hockey games for the Wild over the weekend. Unfortunately, didn't result in any wins, but not a bad way to start a Monday. How are things going?
Good. Yeah, it was so much fun watching both. Because like we talked about in previous episodes, or the previous last Sunday, was we expected both of these two games to be the most difficult games so far on the schedule, and it definitely lived up to that. Man, just this team is different. You know, they were not out of it in either game, and they showed that with the extra attacker, and Dean decided to pull the goalie really early again, and it worked out. So way to grind to get at least 1 point on the weekend.
Yeah, I think the box that was checked most over the weekend was that the Wilds stacked up and gave both the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning everything they could handle. Unfortunately, didn't quite result in a win on Saturday, but the Wilds, skated with the Panthers for pretty much all of that game, and were able to come away with a 1-goal defeat. And against the Lightning, they found themselves down by a couple of goals and pulled the extra attacker magic. Extra attacker 6-on-5, goals number 6 and 7 on the season, which has to lead the NHL by a mile. I don't think anybody else is even close. And so, you look for those kinds of things to be, obviously you want to try to get the wins. The wins would be nice, but we're talking about a team in the Panthers who is undefeated at home, 10-0 at home to start the season, and is widely regarded as one of the best, if not the best, defensive team in the NHL. And you follow that up by going to the home arena of the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. So an incredibly tough get for the Wilds. And, they hung with them despite Jared Spurgeon playing only 3 minutes total for the weekend. Yes, it's disappointing that the Wild didn't get wins, but at the end of the day, I think they showed that things are even enough that you hope you'd be able to get a win at home against both those teams, and we'll have a chance to see it coming up next week against the Lightning. It was a great battle in both games, and I was encouraged by what we saw, despite the fact that both games ended up being losses.
Yeah, I mean, they battled. They got depth scoring once again, so that was nice to see. hey, even Jordie Benn got in on the score sheet, so which is saying a lot. But yeah, this team just battles, and especially against the defending champs, Tampa. I mean, everybody's saying, "Oh, Tampa's not as good as they are." I mean, look who was their scorers tonight. Anthony Cirelli was incredible. Victor Hedman, he's just a menace on the back end. Ryan McDonough. I mean, you got talent, all over the place. Steven Stamkos with the winner. So I mean, they still have their guys. Pat Maroon. I mean, guys won 3 cups in a row. So
Yes.
Tampa very much not done with. So but yeah, way to battle. I'm excited for this upcoming week for the Wild, and yeah, hopefully Jared Spurgeon is okay, but we'll see.
We'll talk a little bit about Spurgeon coming up, but I threw this out on Twitter, and so I want to ask you the same question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no concern at all, 10 being all the concern that's possible, what level of concern do you have for the goaltending situation for the Wild right now?
Yeah, I'm it's up there. I'm a 5 or 6. It keeps creeping up. I'm
Yeah.
really worried about Kaapo. I don't see him right now as being NHL quality. I mean, you're going to need him, like we've talked about, to help spell Cam and make sure Cam doesn't get hurt. And if Cam gets hurt and Kaapo has to be the guy for a week or so or two, it's like, oh man, I don't know. And then, I mean, do you call up the Hamburglar? And then I don't know. He hasn't played in the NHL in a long time, so you need Cam to stay healthy. And yeah, I don't know. It's just yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about backup goaltending.
I've tried to, if we're giving up goals, how are they happening? Whose fault? Tried to do that through pretty much the entire season to see, where the blame lies. A couple of those goals were squarely 100% on Kaapo, and the one right in front of the net, like you have to have that as a
Yeah,
goalie. Like,
no,
you gotta
100%.
make that stop. And so, yeah, it's I said it kind of at the beginning of the year in jest, hoping that it wasn't the case, but we may have seen the best of what Cam Talbot has to offer last year, and now
Hmm.
he's come back to earth a little bit here this year, and with Kaapo, it's kind of the same thing, and we're seeing just how much of a difference it makes when you don't have that elite upper echelon goaltending. That it has put more pressure on both the offense and the defense to try to keep up.
And now, I mean, we see how this team is when they lose one of their core defensemen. That Vegas playoff game when Jonas Brodin went down, and then everybody had to play a little bit more than they were used to, and how much of an effect it has. I mean, you look at guys like John Merrill and Kulikov are having to play more than what the team expected them to play, and I'm sure some of their teammates, and so it's tough. And then you have to have Jordie Benn play too, and so it's it's going to be interesting with to see what how they divvy up the minutes, and if they're going to have to switch some D pairings to help cover for guys. And yeah, we'll see. It's going to be very very interesting. And we knew coming into this season too that with the divisions back to what they were, that it was going to be tougher, to begin with, because you're not playing the some of the lower end of the Pacific teams
Yeah,
a lot more than the normal.
I really hope that Addison was not played against the Lightning solely for the fact that he got to the arena on the same day as the game, because ultimately, if you're bringing Addison up and you are playing Jordie Benn instead, and
You can't have that happen.
to Jordie Benn's credit, I didn't think he played poorly considering that
No,
he hasn't played in several games.
right.
I didn't think he did anything that indirectly resulted in the Wild losing the game, but at the same time, Addison gives you more. And
Yeah,
so my hope is that he will play on Wednesday against the Devils, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
that's the perfect opponent for him to get into because the Devils, haven't, they're not the greatest offensive team right now without Jack Hughes, and so they have a few big name guys that we know, PK Subban, and their goaltender Blackwood is okay, but it's a team that Addison shouldn't have to worry about so much defensively, and he brings a lot more offense than Jordie Benn, even though Jordie got an assist tonight. But yeah, I would rather have a smooth skating defenseman out there than Jordie Benn. So I'm all for playing Addison and watching his game continue to grow because every time he's played with the Wild, it's like he hasn't missed a beat at all, and so he's NHL quality for sure.
Yeah, he needs to play. Bottom line, and so confidence can be pulled from these two games against Florida and Tampa Bay, in that the Wild were able to stick with them. And we should see Calen Addison going forward, filling in for Jared Spurgeon as long as he is out, which hopefully won't be for too long. Tell you what, let's shift to a topic that kind of grabbed Wild media attention over the weekend. Something's going on with Kevin Fiala and the Wild, and I don't know what it means, but it seems as though things aren't great between both of them. So we'll talk about that coming up here on Locked On Wild after this. But first, does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all of that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there is no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Follow us everywhere you listen to podcasts for great content all throughout the week. Continuing to look at some of the big storylines from the weekend, and Kevin Fiala did have a goal against Tampa Bay, his first in a little while. He's now starting to pick up his play a little bit. But don't tell that to Dean Evison because, boy, oh boy, there's been some stuff going on with Fiala here over the last handful of games. Got yanked off the power play over the weekend, and has been straight up just benched a couple of times down the stretch in recent games. And Michael Russo had an article over the weekend as well, talking about not everything being great in Kevin Fiala land right now, between him and the Wild. And it just leads to another kind of bizarre chapter in the last 6 months for Fiala, going to arbitration with the Wild as opposed to signing a long-term deal, having that long scoreless streak midway through this early part of the season. I don't know. It's getting to the point where I think that this may lead to a divorce between these two before too long if this continues to kind of drag out the way that it has.
Yeah, it's I tell this to my dad all the time. I think it's embarrassing when you go to arbitration. Like you can't, yeah, I mean you can't come to an agreement at all with the team, and you have to go to a third party to figure out how much they're going to pay you for 1 year. It's a little embarrassing. I I don't see the relationship lasting past this season, and depending on how things are, maybe trade deadline. I mean, because if you don't if you're not going to have an extension, and they need a center, he's the guy that they could offer for teams because teams are going to say, hey, we want Rossi, we want Boldy, we want Addison. Hey, will you take Kevin Fiala, a proven goal scorer? And they have the depth at wing, in the wings with Marat and all those guys, the Rossis, the Boldys, and so and Beckman, and so it's going to be interesting. And he's like, talk to Dean about not being on the power play. So that was a heck of a quote, So, but there's going to be centers out there available. So, the Wild fans have always wanted Tomas Hertl here, so that would be nice. Nice to get him here at some point. But we'll see. Hey, Fialas, he had a big goal tonight. But it's a weird relationship right now for sure.
Yeah, it's bizarre because, that quote about ask Dean in regards to why Fiala wasn't on the power play and why he didn't play down the stretch. A reporter asked him point blank, asked Dean if there was some reason that Fiala didn't play late in that game against, I believe it was against the Panthers, where this kind of flared up as much as it did. And Evison just basically said, we went with other guys at that point. And so is all of that Kevin's fault? No. I do think he is, much like Matt Dumba, I think he is just a convenience at times.
He's polarizing. Yeah.
Yes, he's just a convenient scapegoat for the turnover issues that plague this team sometimes, because he does turn the puck over much like the rest of the team does. It's not like he is the only one that's doing it, but as with Matt Dumba, it seems like people like to point to him a lot for all the turnovers. And another thing that was pointed out on Twitter today, his line has been arguably the most changed line on the team over the last couple of years. I mean, he has had line mates from Marcus Johansson all the way to Freddie Gaudreau to now Ryan Hartman. So it's not like he has consistent line mates that he's been asked to play with.
No.
And so not all of it's his fault by any stretch. But at the end of the day, like you said, there's going to have to be a tough choice made on this team in the offseason. And it's looking like it's either going to be Fiala or Matt Dumba. And I get the sense, like you said, with the number of players that are waiting to come up and fill roster spots, I get the sense that there is more of a desire to lean towards keeping Matt Dumba in that situation as opposed to Kevin Fiala. And if you would have asked me this question a couple of months ago, complete opposite.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable how it can change like that. Hopefully they can get the relationship figured out. But because he's a heck of a player and one of the few game changers that the Wild have had. But thank God, like a guy like Ryan Hartman has stepped up too to fill that goal scoring role. Heck, Marcus Foligno, another big goal tonight. So
Yeah.
that's why we continue to hammer home on that depth, especially sometimes when you're proven goal scorers are having quieter, you would ask, and Krill's starting to step it up, but we'll see. It's it's interesting. You just never know. He could, like we've mentioned here previously, be a hot trade bait come trade deadline or the draft. Once the season's over with. So that's one we will definitely keep our eyes on for sure.
Yeah, never a dull day in Wildlands. Crazy comebacks or just Dean putting people in the doghouse on a daily basis. Speaking of that depth, the Wild have a couple of players that look like they could come up and play right now. And so we'll finish today's episode talking a little bit about Matt Boldy's return, as well as continued excellence from Marco Rossi. More with Alex Micheletti on today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. But first, Thanksgiving week is here. And that means all of the treats you love are going to be filling up your plate again and again and again. If you want to enjoy those great tasting desserts, may I recommend you go for a Built Bar. Built Bar has all of the great tastes with less than half of the calories. Your favorite slice of pie may carry upwards of 300 calories on the low end. Built Bars, though, only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar packed with plenty of protein. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein covered in 100% real chocolate. So head to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off of your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Seth Topol joined by Alex Micheletti. And Alex, if we're looking for somebody who could potentially fill the roster spot of, say, Kevin Fiala when he gets traded, if he gets traded, Wild have a couple of guys that are ready at this exact moment because Matt Boldy came back from his injury and it looks like he never missed a day. And Marco Rossi continues to just do ridiculous things for the Iowa Wild. Those guys are ready to play. The question is not if they'll be called up. The question is when.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, especially for Boldy with coming off an injury like an ankle. I mean, uh, didn't affect his skating one iota. And Marco Rossi, hey, he plays center, the one position that the Wild lack. With the big club. So, yeah, they've proven it. Remember Billy G saying when they got sent down that he told them, you know, go down there and improve, and have your big minutes and put up the production, and that's what they've done. And so, yeah, it's incredible that Iowa Wild team, the full team. It's fun to watch. The fans down there in the great state of Iowa are getting their money's worth for sure. And these guys want to be on the big club, and when they've been up here, they've shown it too. I mean, Adam Beckman, he saved that Pittsburgh game, and so yeah, I'm really looking forward to Boldy getting a chance. It was unfortunate that he got hurt because maybe he would have made the team. Yeah, another great thing too is it puts guys on notice like
Yep.
Nick Bukestad, Victor Rask, Jordan Greenway, and maybe in years past their seat was more comfortable than it has been because the Iowa Wild haven't been great. But now that they've infused their talent that they've acquired via the draft and free agent signings, that hey, you guys in the big club in St. Paul, watch out because some of the guys in Des Moines, they're not too far away and they can drive up and be in the lineup and take your spot. So watch out, and it's good. It creates great competition, and it's you love to see it, competitive battle to make it to the big team.
And in some cases, as in Calen Addison's case, they can beat the media plane to Tampa Bay for the game. I'm sure you saw the tweet storm that Michael Russo was throwing down about a plane getting over fueled somehow and fuel just leaking all over the tarmac to the point that they brought a Zamboni out to try to clean it up. Absolute chaos.
There's nothing more than I love than a Michael Russo rant. So I cannot wait. It's going to be glorious. He took that very funny picture of Dane from the Pioneer Press. Looked like he was struggling, and hey, it was less than an hour flight too. It's just, oh man, I cannot wait to listen to that podcast. And Michael's so funny, and so yeah, it should be fun. It shouldn't be that big of a nightmare when you're only going that far in the state of Florida too, and it wasn't because of weather. So it's yeah, that's what makes it even more funny.
Truly bizarre. I wonder if when Marco Rossi and Matt Boldy are eventually called up, I wonder if they both hop up to the Kaprizov line or if you go Kaprizov, Zuccarello, and Rossi, so that then you
I would love that.
That'd be ridiculous. I wonder then it means I think it means that Kevin Fiala would get a little better help on the wing with
Yes.
Boldy, because I think you got to pair those guys with either Kaprizov or Fiala when they come up.
You have to, because they're more strong defensively. I don't think you would say Krill and Kevin one of their
I'm not-
strengths is on the defensive side of things.
yeah,
So they definitely would need. They're more risk takers. So it'd be nice to have more of a defensive, minded. They do both, but more safe defensively too. With those guys, and making a young guy feel comfortable too. And you wouldn't have to worry about either of those two guys skating. Everybody
true.
always rags on Victor Rask, how he's an anchor when he's out there. So just putting an anchor on his line. But I've loved what I've seen so far from both of them. And it's not like COVID's affecting Rossi at all. So
No.
long term. So yeah, it's great. And that's one guy you don't have to worry about any off ice. He's a rink rat, just a workout freak. We've seen all of his videos that his dad has posted of him always like on a bike and stuff. And so it'd be nice to see how he could do against NHL competition. It's a little bit different than what I call the always hungry league, the AHL, because you got guys that are just dying to be up and and going from being on a coach bus to living that NHL life where you get the meals on the planes and the 5-star hotels. So it's time to see the kids come up here and get some more youth into the lineup. And it's not like it's a rebuild either. These guys can fuse in with the veterans that are already playing really well and add to the depth.
Final thought: Ryan Hartman, more fights, please. Absolutely, like just out of nowhere aggression. And he dropped, I can't remember the name of the Lightning.
Zach Bogosian.
Yeah.
And he's a massive dude. Yeah.
My word. Ryan
And
Hartman
how about
everything.
Hey, Hartman and Brandon Duhaime, they do not care. They will take on
Ooh.
anybody. The other night too with Brandon, where he just straight up dropped the gloves and he's like, "Bring on the smoke." I mean, I love it. I love seeing guys with that kind of attitude and spark. And Billy G loves both of those guys, and so it's cool. Ryan Hartman standing up for his teammates and scoring big time goals. I mean, he's doing it all. I mean, he's exactly who you want on your team for sure.
Ryan Hartman for the Hart Trophy. Maybe.
Hey, yeah, keep on scoring. Keep on scoring. Hey, there's a good guy in Edmonton that would like a word. Connor McDavid or
Yeah.
Leon Draisaitl. I mean, those two. I
Take-
cannot wait to see either of them play in person for sure.
Yeah. That one I think is going to have to be viewed in person because that Edmonton team is disgustingly good.
Way too good. Yeah, they took apart Chicago. So
Throttled Chicago. Well,
yeah.
I think that is where we're going to leave it for tonight. Obviously, optimism after the losses to Florida and Tampa Bay, because the Wild did not stop fighting until the game was over. We're just going to have to keep an eye on Jared Spurgeon's injury situation and this Kevin Fiala situation to see how that possibly gets resolved. Regardless, the Wild have some great names down in Iowa that are ready to step up when needed. So all of that wrapped into a nice, neat little bow here for your Monday episode of Locked On Wild. And now that your first listen is done, head over to the Locked On NHL podcast to get a full recap of everything that happened all weekend and some of the biggest storylines in the NHL here today. The Locked On NHL podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts, just like Locked On Wild. Follow us everywhere for new episodes all throughout the week, as well as on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We've got new content coming every single day of the week on all of those platforms. Trying to keep you as up to date on the Minnesota Wild as feasibly possible. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.